Welcome to Life Stories, where we dive into real, raw, and inspiring tales of resilience and personal growth. Today, we're sharing the powerful journey of Samantha Parker, a woman who faced unimaginable betrayal from her own family during a life or death situation. With nothing but her strength and determination, Samantha transformed her life, learning valuable lessons about self-worth, boundaries, and the true meaning of family. Join us as we follow her path of healing and empowerment. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to start today's story. It was Christmas Eve, and instead of spending the evening surrounded by the warmth of family and the joy of the holiday season, I found myself alone in a sterile hospital room, gripped by the searing pain in my abdomen. The rhythmic beep of the machines monitoring my vitals seemed to echo in my mind, almost drowning out the world around me. My name is Samantha Parker, and I am 33 years old. It's funny how life has a way of showing you the truth when you least expect it. Here I was, in the midst of an emergency surgery that could very well determine whether I lived or not. Yet all I could feel was the crushing weight of betrayal from the people who were supposed to care for me the most, my parents. I lay there, clutching my phone with trembling hands, my body racked with pain. My 2-year-old twins, Lucas and Lily, played quietly in the corner of the room, blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to hit them. A nurse, Valerie, was checking my vitals, her face a picture of professionalism. Yet I couldn't help but notice how her eyes softened when she looked at me. She could tell something was wrong beyond the physical pain. And in a way, she knew that the real wound I was dealing with wasn't something the doctors could fix. The phone call had come just an hour earlier, just before they wheeled me into the operating room. My mother's voice, loud and harsh, had pierced through the silence of my hospital room like a knife. "Don't you dare ask us to cancel our plans again. We've had these Elton John tickets for months," she had screamed. Her words rang in my ears as if I were hearing them from a distance, as though my reality had become some twisted version of a dream. I sat there, stunned. My parents, who I had supported financially for years, were more concerned about their concert than they were about the well-being of their own daughter, who was facing a potentially life-threatening surgery. I couldn't believe it. I had asked them for help, for something so simple, for them to watch their own grandchildren while I went under the knife. I needed them now, more than ever. Yet they couldn't be bothered. My heart broke as I realized that my entire life had been one of disappointment in their eyes. One where my needs had always been secondary to my younger sister Jessica's. Jessica, the golden child, could do no wrong. She had always been their favorite. The one who got the attention, the praise, and the love. I never stood a chance. Not even when I graduated college with honors. Or when I married the love of my life, David. My parents had barely acknowledged my accomplishments because Jessica had been doing something more glamorous that weekend. When I had my twins, they visited once, claiming the babies were too fussy for their liking. Now, as I lay there, terrified that the surgery might not go well, all I could think about was the deep, painful realization that the people who were supposed to love and support me had always seen me as nothing more than a burden. My mother's callousness, her refusal to even consider my request, was a final blow. I had always put my parents' needs before my own. Even after David's death 6 months ago, a drunk driver had taken him from me, leaving me to raise Lucas and Lily alone, while I battled the depression that came with such a profound loss. I had supported my parents financially for years, sending them $2,500 every month to help with their mortgage and expenses. Even after losing David, I kept sending the money, thinking it was my duty, my responsibility as their daughter. But now, in my time of need, they couldn't even be bothered to watch my children while I underwent surgery. Tears began to fall silently onto the hospital blanket, and as I looked at the phone in my hand, something shifted within me. I had been living in this emotional fog for so long, thinking that family was supposed to come first, that we were supposed to support one another. But now, I saw the truth. It wasn't mutual. It had never been mutual. My parents had used me, manipulated me, and I had allowed it because I was desperate for their approval. But now, I knew I had to make a change. Valerie, who had been silently watching me, gently squeezed my shoulder. "I can help," she said softly, breaking the silence. "My friend Olivia is a professional nanny who specializes in childhood trauma. Let me call her for you. She's amazing with kids. I'm sure she can come help watch the twins while you go through this." Her voice was kind, understanding, and the contrast between her warmth and my parents' coldness was stark. I looked at her, feeling a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, there was someone out there who understood what I was going through. My parents had always made me feel like I was alone, that my struggles didn't matter. But in this moment, Valerie's kindness reminded me that not everyone was like them. "Yes, please," I whispered, the words barely leaving my lips. I needed to cut the poisonous ties that had bound me to my parents for so long. As Valerie made the call, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. For the first time in my life, I was making a decision that wasn't motivated by guilt, but by self-preservation. I was choosing my children, choosing myself, over the toxic people who had failed to love me properly. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, I felt a flicker of freedom. I could no longer let my parents control my life. I had to protect my children from the same neglect I had endured. And as I lay there in that hospital room, I made a vow to myself. I would not allow my children to grow up feeling invisible. They deserved better, and so did I. That night, after I was prepped for surgery, I sent 2 messages. The first was to my bank, canceling all future automatic transfers to my parents' account. The second was to my parents. I will no longer be providing financial support. My children and I deserve better than being your afterthoughts. Don't contact me again. As the nurses wheeled me toward the operating room, a surprising feeling took over me, freedom. The surgery was risky, but I was ready to take control of my life, to stop being a victim of their neglect. Whatever happened in that operating room, I knew that the person I had been, the person who sought approval from people who never truly cared, was gone. And in her place, a mother had emerged, fiercely protective of her children, and determined to create a future where they would never be treated the way I had been. The surgery was over. I woke up, groggy and weak, my body feeling like it had been through a war. The pain was still there, dull but persistent, and I could feel the soft touch of the hospital sheets beneath me as I slowly opened my eyes. The first thing I saw was Valerie's face, watching over me with a caring expression that contrasted sharply with my parents' earlier indifference. She smiled softly when she saw my eyes flicker open. "How are you feeling?" she asked gently. Her voice was soothing, and I was grateful for her presence. "Better," I whispered, trying to sit up, but the pain in my abdomen stopped me from doing so. My body felt like it was made of lead. But even then, there was something freeing about the moment. I had made it through the surgery, and I was still here. I hadn't died, like I had feared so much. But what truly struck me in that moment was that I was still here, without the support of the people I had thought would be there for me, my parents. It was a sobering thought. For the first time, I was forced to reckon with the truth. I had spent so much of my life living in the shadow of my family's expectations. I had spent years trying to make them proud, trying to earn their love and attention. But it had never been enough. In my heart, I knew I deserved more than what they had given me. But this was a turning point. I couldn't keep living in this cycle of guilt and disappointment. The emotional weight I had carried around for so long, the feeling of being invisible, of being a burden, was not mine to bear anymore. As I lay in that hospital bed, I felt something shift inside me. A deep, profound change was happening. The guilt that had once dictated my every decision was starting to lift. I could feel my strength growing. Slowly but surely, I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was beginning to live again. The next few days were a blur of pain, medication, and occasional visits from Olivia, who had been an absolute godsend. She helped care for Lucas and Lily while I was recovering. Her calm, patient demeanor was a stark contrast to my parents' impatience and selfishness. Every time I saw her interact with my twins, I felt a pang of sorrow. They deserved so much more than what my parents had offered them. But I couldn't dwell on that anymore. I had to focus on moving forward. During one of my more lucid moments, I saw my phone blinking with notifications, 27 missed calls and numerous text messages. Most of them from my parents and Jessica. I could feel the tension rising within me as I unlocked my phone, bracing myself for what I would find. The messages from my parents were exactly what I expected: confusion, anger, and desperation. Not once had they asked how my surgery had gone, or how the twins were doing. Their first concern was money. The final message from my father made my blood boil. "You can't just cut us off like this. We've planned a cruise next month, and the tickets are non-refundable." I felt my heart harden. How could they be so selfish? Here I was, in the middle of a life-threatening surgery, and they were worried about a vacation. I could feel the weight of their disregard for me and my children. And it only strengthened my resolve. I couldn't keep sacrificing myself for people who didn't care about me. I had to protect my children. And in order to do that, I had to let go of the toxic relationship with my parents. But then there was Jessica's message. Her tone was different, genuinely concerned. "Mom and Dad just told me you were having some minor procedure. What's going on? Why are they freaking out about money?" It dawned on me in that moment that my parents had lied to her. They had downplayed the seriousness of my surgery, convincing her that I was just being dramatic about a routine checkup. The realization was a punch to the gut. But I also saw an opportunity for change. I sent her the full story, explaining everything that had happened. Her response came quickly. "Oh my God, Samantha, I had no idea. I would have helped with the twins if I knew it was an emergency." "I'm so sorry." I believed them. For the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope. Jessica wasn't cruel. She had just been raised in an environment where she believed her needs came first, where my parents had always made her feel like she was the priority. But maybe, just maybe, this revelation would open her eyes to the truth about our parents. After my surgery, I made several decisions. First, I hired Olivia part-time to help with the twins during my recovery. I couldn't do it all on my own, and Olivia's help allowed me to focus on getting stronger. Second, I contacted a lawyer to draft a will, naming a trusted friend as the twins' guardian should anything happen to me. Certainly not my parents. And third, I blocked my parents' numbers, allowing only Jessica limited contact as I assessed her sincerity. The financial implications of my decision were significant. The $2,500 I had been sending my parents every month represented nearly a third of my income as a graphic designer. Without that burden, I could finally afford proper childcare, start rebuilding the emergency fund that had been depleted after David's death, and, perhaps most importantly, begin to focus on my own well-being. Something I had neglected for far too long. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a mix of emotions. There was guilt, of course. I had been conditioned to believe that I was wrong for putting myself and my children first. There was fear, too. Fear about managing recovery while caring for two toddlers. But beneath it all, there was something new. A sense of self-respect. An inner strength that I had never known before. I was finally putting myself and my children first. And it felt like the right thing to do. As I drifted off to sleep, the weight of the past few days settled on me. But I knew I was on the path to something better. I wasn't alone anymore, and neither were my children. We were going to be okay. 2 weeks after my surgery, I was slowly regaining my strength. My incision still throbbed if I moved too quickly. But each day felt like a small victory. Olivia continued to be an enormous help with the twins, and I was grateful for her presence. She arrived early every morning to assist with Lucas and Lily while I worked from home. The flexibility of my graphic design clients was a relief, allowing me to juggle my recovery and work without feeling the pressure to be everywhere at once. It was a simple, peaceful rhythm, a stark contrast to the chaos that had defined my life for so long. As the days passed, I received several messages from Jessica. At first, they were brief, cautious, but gradually, she opened up more. She admitted that she had always been led to believe that I was the one distancing myself from the family. That I was somehow choosing to cut them off. But as we spent more time talking, she began to see how manipulative our parents had been. I never realized they were pushing you away, she confessed one evening while we watched the twins play. I always thought it was you choosing to stay away from us. But now I see it. They never made you feel like you mattered. Did they? Her words hit me like a wave. A mixture of sadness and understanding flooding my chest. Jessica wasn't cruel, she had just been manipulated by our parents. Taught to believe that their priorities should always come first. But with the truth laid bare, I could sense that something was shifting within her. 2. The evening after our conversation, there was a knock at the door. I wasn't surprised, it was only a matter of time before they came looking for me. As they always did, through the peephole, I saw my parents standing in the hallway. My mother was nervously clutching her designer purse, her face tight with anxiety, while my father stood with his arms crossed, his usual impatient demeanor evident even in the quiet of the hallway. My heart pounded as I debated whether to open the door. I knew what was coming, but part of me still wasn't ready to face them. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door just a crack, enough to speak to them without letting them into my space. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice steady, though it trembled beneath the surface. "Natasha, darling, we've been so worried," my mother began, her voice dripping with false sweetness. She tried to step closer, but I held the door firm. "You haven't been answering our calls, and we needed to make sure you and the twins were all right." I wasn't buying it. The concern in her voice wasn't genuine, it never had been. "We're fine," I replied flatly, a new strength coursing through me. "Now if that's all." "It's not all," my father interrupted, pushing slightly against the door. His voice had shifted to one of authority, as if his entitled demands had always been met without question. "We need to discuss this ridiculous financial situation. The bank called about our mortgage payment, and we had to dip into our cruise savings to cover it." I felt my blood run cold at his words. But I didn't flinch. No longer would I cower or apologize for setting boundaries. "The audacity," I muttered under my breath. They were concerned about money that they thought was owed to them, yet they had never once asked about my recovery, about the twins, or even whether I was alive. All they saw was an opportunity to keep their lifestyle intact, to maintain the image they had worked so hard to create. "I told you I'm cutting financial ties," I said firmly, looking directly into my father's eyes. "I meant it." "But sweetie," my mother pleaded, raising her voice slightly, "we've come to depend on that money. Your father and I adjusted our lifestyle based on your commitment to help us." "Your commitment?" I echoed in disbelief. "I've been sending you money out of guilt and obligation, while you couldn't even watch your own grandchildren during my emergency surgery." My father's face darkened, his frustration boiling over. "That's not fair, Natasha. It's not fair that I had to go through surgery alone, not knowing if I'd make it." I shot back, my anger rising now. "Did you even care?" Their silence was deafening. In that moment, I realized that I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need them to understand. What mattered was that I had finally found my voice, and I was done being their doormat. "We made one mistake," my mother whispered dramatically, her voice full of the same manipulative tone I had grown so accustomed to over the years. "Are you really going to punish us like this?" "This isn't punishment, Mom," I said, feeling a strange calmness overtake me. "This is consequence. I've spent my entire life seeking your approval and support, and in my moment of greatest need, you chose Elton John tickets over helping me." I stepped back, ready to close the door, but my father blocked it with his foot. "We're your parents," he said, as if that should mean something to me. "And I'm a parent too," I countered, standing taller. "I would never treat Lucas and Lily the way you've treated me." "Never." Just then, Lily toddled into the room, clutching her stuffed giraffe. My mother's face softened, and she immediately tried to reach for her. But Lily, unfamiliar with these strangers, pulled away and hid behind my legs. I stared at my mother, holding the door firmly. "I think you should leave," I said quietly. When I'm ready to talk. If I'm ever ready, I'll reach out. With that, I gently closed the door. Later that night, I received a group email from my father, detailing how I had abandoned them in their time of need. His message painted me as the ungrateful daughter who had cut them off without cause. But this time, the lies didn't hurt as much. The truth was clear to me. And it would become clear to others too. I had finally freed myself from the chains they had wrapped around me for years. Months passed since my decision to cut ties with my parents. And while the journey had been filled with ups and downs, I knew I had made the right choice. My life, once consumed by guilt and manipulation, had transformed. I had found strength in myself, in my children, and in the support network I had built from the ashes of my family's neglect. Olivia continued to help me care for Lucas and Lily, and I was able to focus on rebuilding my career. My side business designing memorial websites flourished, and my graphic design clients were understanding as I navigated this new chapter of my life. The most profound change, however, was in how I viewed myself. I had gone from seeking validation to recognizing my own worth. My priorities had shifted. It was no longer about earning my parents' love or approval. It was about protecting my children and creating a life filled with respect and love. One day, months after everything had settled, I received a letter from my mother. It was a handwritten apology. I had never expected that. The words were carefully written, a stark contrast to the manipulative tone she had always used. She acknowledged her mistakes, admitted that she had been jealous of my independence, and apologized for not being there when I needed them the most. I didn't know how to feel. Part of me wanted to forgive them, but the other part knew that forgiveness couldn't erase the past. I needed time to process, to think about what I wanted for my future. And while I wasn't ready to reconcile just yet, I had learned a powerful lesson. The love of a family should never come with strings attached. Thank you for following my story. If you want to hear more, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more life stories.